Mira Voss had lived her whole life without a mark on her wrist. In the Thornwood Pack, that mark meant everything. It meant a family had claimed you, an alpha had chosen you, and the world had a place ready for you before you even opened your eyes. Mira had none of that. She was born during a hard winter, when her mother died before she could name her properly, and the pack elders simply wrote Voss on a slip of paper and moved on with their lives. She grew up in the back rooms of the pack house, doing chores nobody wanted to do, eating what was left after everyone else had eaten first. People in Thornwood were not cruel to her in loud ways. It was worse than that. They were cruel in quiet ways, in the way they looked past her at gatherings, in the way mothers pulled their children a little closer when she walked by, as if whatever made her unwanted might be catching. She grew used to being invisible. She told herself invisible was safe. Nobody hurts what they don't see. But every pack has its traditions, and Thornwood's biggest tradition was the reckoning. Once a year, when autumn turned the trees the color of rust, the pack gathered in the old stone arena at the edge of the territory. It was where outcasts, orphans, and anyone without a strong claim to a family name had to prove they deserved to keep breathing on Thornwood land. Some years, the fights were fair. Some years, they weren't. This year, the council decided Mira didn't deserve fair. She found out 3 days before the reckoning. She was called into the council hall, where 5 old alphas sat behind a long wooden table, looking at her like she was a problem they were finally getting around to solving. The head of the council, a broad man named Council Elder Draven, didn't even bother standing up. "You'll fight in the arena," he said. "No weapon, no partner, just you, and whoever we decide to send." Mira didn't flinch. She had learned a long time ago that flinching only encouraged people. "How many?" she asked. Draven smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "As many as it takes." She understood then. This wasn't a trial. This was a punishment dressed up as tradition. They wanted her gone, and they wanted the whole pack to watch it happen, so nobody would ever ask questions about how it happened. She went home that night, if you could call 4 bare walls and a cot a home, and she didn't cry. She sat on the edge of her bed and counted the cracks in the ceiling, the way she always did when her chest felt too tight to hold anything else. 17 cracks. She counted them twice, just to be sure, because counting was easier than feeling. The day of the reckoning came fast, the way bad days always do. The arena was carved out of gray stone, old enough that moss grew in the corners even though blood had probably touched every inch of it at some point. The stands were packed. Almost the whole pack had come, dressed in their best clothes like it was some kind of festival. Mira supposed, in a way, it was. Just not for her. She walked into the pit wearing simple leather clothes, no armor, no weapon, exactly as ordered. The gate behind her groaned shut. She counted the rivets on it without meaning to. 31. Some habits never went away. The crowd noise dropped into a low, ugly hum. She could feel their eyes on her, waiting, hungry for a show. Somewhere above, on the high platform reserved for pack royalty, sat the visiting Alpha King, Ronan Ashgrave, a man whose reputation traveled faster than he did. He ruled the Ashgrave territory 2 valleys over, and Thornwood's council had invited him partly out of respect and partly to show off. Show him what, exactly? Nobody had told him yet. He hadn't planned on staying for the whole event. Kings had places to be. But something about the girl standing alone in that pit, spine straight, jaw tight, made him stay in his seat. The first fighter they sent in was a young pack member named Torin, big for his age, eager to prove himself. He came at Mira fast, sloppy, more interested in impressing the crowd than actually winning. She sidestepped him twice, let him tire himself out swinging at air, and when he finally overextended, she used his own momentum to put him face first into the dirt. The crowd didn't cheer. They just stared, confused, like the joke hadn't landed the way it was supposed to. Draven's jaw tightened up in the stands. He sent in another fighter. Then another. By the 4th fighter, Mira's arms were shaking from exhaustion. Her knuckles split open, a bruise blooming dark along her ribs. She was breathing hard, but she was still standing, and that seemed to bother the council more than anything else could have. Up on the platform, Ronan leaned forward without realizing he'd moved. He wasn't watching a fight anymore. He was watching a girl refuse to be erased, over and over, in front of a crowd that wanted nothing more than to watch her disappear. Fifth fighter, sixth, each one bigger, meaner, sent in with less pretense of fairness and more open intention to finish her. Mira's vision blurred at the edges. Blood filled her mouth, copper and warm, and she spat it into the dirt, because swallowing it felt like giving up something she wasn't ready to give. She thought about her mother, who she never got to know. She thought about the 17 cracks in her ceiling. She thought about nothing at all, just the next second, and the one after that, because that was the only way to survive a day like this. 1 second at a time. The council elders stood up, done pretending this was sport instead of an execution. He gestured, and the biggest fighter in Thornwood stepped into the pit. A man named Bronwick, built like the arena walls themselves, sent in not to test Mira, but to end things quickly and quietly, so the crowd could go home and pretend they hadn't watched a girl get killed for the crime of being unwanted. Something in Ronan Ashgrave's chest went very still and very cold. He stood up. He didn't shout. He didn't announce himself the way kings usually did, with titles and warnings. He simply stood, and the entire arena noticed, because when an alpha king rises to his feet, every wolf in a 100-mile radius feels it in their bones. The crowd noise died into silence, so complete you could hear the wind moving through the stands. He walked down from the platform, past guards too stunned to stop him, past council members too shocked to speak, and stepped into the pit himself, placing his body between Mira and Bronwick like it was the simplest decision in the world. "She's under my protection," he said. Not loud, not dramatic, just final, the way a door closes. He didn't look at the crowd when he said it. He looked at her. Mira, half blind with exhaustion and blood in her mouth, stared back at him like she couldn't decide if she was furious or relieved, and settled somewhere confusing in between. The council erupted. Elder Draven came down from his seat, red-faced, shouting something about tradition, about protocol, about how a king from another territory had no right to interfere in Thornwood's reckoning. Ronan let him finish. Then he said, very calmly, that he had every right, because he was choosing to claim her under a king's protection, an old law, older than Draven's grandfather, one that no council could override. Nobody argued with him after that. Nobody dared. The crowd that had come to watch a girl fall instead watched a king plant his feet in the dirt and dare the world to try something. Mira walked out of that arena on her own legs, refusing help even though her whole body screamed for it, with Ronan half a step behind her the entire way, close enough to catch her if she dropped, far enough not to touch what she hadn't offered. That night, alone in her small room, Mira finally let herself shake. She sat on the edge of her cot, knees pulled to her chest, and cried the way she hadn't let herself cry in years, quietly, angrily, like even her tears had to be earned. She didn't know that outside her door, at a respectful distance, Ronan Ashgrave stood guard until sunrise, refusing to leave, refusing to explain why, even to himself. The next morning, he sought her out. He found her sitting outside on an old wooden bench, wrapping her own knuckles with cloth, because nobody had offered to help her, and honestly, she hadn't expected anyone to. "You didn't have to do that," she said, not looking up. "I know," he said. "Then why did you?" He thought about it for a long moment, longer than most people take to answer a simple question. "Because I watched you get knocked down 6 times, he said, "and get up 7. Mira almost laughed, except laughing hurt her ribs. "Guess I lost count somewhere around Fighter 4. "I didn't," he said. "I counted." She looked up at him then, really looked, and saw something she wasn't used to seeing directed at her. Not pity, not disgust, not the careful blankness people usually wore around her. Just steady, plain attention, like she was worth looking at for reasons that had nothing to do with what happened to her yesterday. Word spread through Thornwood fast, the way word always does in small packs. The unwanted girl, the one without a mark on her wrist, had caught the attention of an alpha king. Some people whispered it like gossip, others whispered it like a warning. Elder Draven and the council said nothing at all, which told Mira everything she needed to know about how afraid of Ronan they suddenly were. Ronan didn't leave Thornwood the next day, or the day after that. He told the council he had matters to attend to, matters he never quite specified, and everyone understood well enough not to ask. He found reasons to be near Mira, checking on her injuries, which she insisted were fine even when they clearly weren't, walking the same paths she walked, showing up at the times she usually ate, like it was a coincidence, like either of them believed that. Mira wasn't used to being wanted, and she didn't trust it. She'd spent her whole life learning that people who paid attention to her usually wanted something, or worse, wanted to take something away. So she kept her guard up, sharp and ready, even as some small, stubborn part of her started looking forward to the moments Ronan appeared without warning. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after the reckoning, she finally asked him the question that had been sitting in her chest since the arena gate closed behind her. What happens now? They were sitting by the river that cut along the edge of Thornwood territory, water moving quiet and fast over smooth stones. Ronan was quiet for a moment before he answered. Now, he said, you come back with me, to Ashgrave, if you want to. And if I don't want to, then I go home alone, and you stay here, and Thornwood's council pretends none of this happened until they find another excuse to send you into a pit. It wasn't a threat. It was just true, and they both knew it. Mira looked out at the river for a long time. She thought about the 17 cracks in her ceiling, about a childhood spent being looked past instead of looked at, about a pack that had never once treated her like she belonged to it. She thought about a king who stood up in front of a crowd of people who wanted her gone and said, simply, she's under my protection, without needing anyone's permission. I don't even know you, she said, finally. No, he agreed, but you know I stood up when everyone else sat down. That has to count for something. It did. It counted for a lot more than she wanted to admit out loud. She agreed to go with him, not because she trusted him completely. Trust like that doesn't happen overnight, no matter what the storybooks say, but because staying in Thornwood meant staying somewhere that had never once been kind to her, and leaving meant at least the possibility of something different. The council tried to stop her leaving, of course. Elder Draven stood in the gate the morning she packed her few belongings, arguing that she belonged to Thornwood, that she couldn't simply be claimed away like property. Ronan, standing beside her, didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. She isn't property, he said. She never was. And she's not asking your permission. Neither am I. Draven didn't have an answer for that. Nobody ever did when it came to Ronan Ashgrave. They left Thornwood behind that morning. The arena, the council hall, the small room with 17 cracks in the ceiling, all of it shrinking behind them as they walked toward a territory that had never given Mira a single reason to expect kindness. But somehow, for the first time in her life, she found herself hoping it might. The road to Ashgrave took 2 full days on foot, through forest thick enough that sunlight came down in broken pieces instead of whole beams. Mira didn't talk much during the walk. She wasn't used to conversation that didn't come with an edge to it, some hidden insult waiting at the end. Ronan didn't push her. He walked beside her at an easy pace, matching her steps even when she deliberately slowed down to test whether he would leave her behind. He never did. On the first night, they made camp near a stream. Ronan built the fire without being asked, and when Mira reached automatically to do it herself, out of habit, out of years of nobody else ever doing it for her, he simply handed her a blanket instead and let her sit while he finished the job. It was such a small thing, it shouldn't have meant anything. But Mira found herself staring at the fire long after it caught, turning the strange, unfamiliar feeling of being taken care of over in her mind, like a coin she wasn't sure was real. You don't have to keep testing me, Ronan said quietly, not looking up from the flames. I'm not, she said. You are. You've reached for every chore since we left Thornwood, before I could get to it. You're waiting for me to stop. Mira didn't answer right away. The fire cracked and popped between them, throwing orange light across her face, across the fading bruises she still carried from the arena. "People don't just help," she said finally. "Not where I'm from. Help costs something. I just haven't figured out what you want yet." Ronan looked at her then, steady, not unkind. "Maybe where I'm from, help doesn't cost anything. Maybe I just don't like watching people get treated like garbage." "That's it? That's the whole reason?" "That's the whole reason." She wanted to believe him. She wasn't sure yet that she did, but she wanted to. And for someone who had spent her whole life expecting the worst from people, wanting to believe was already more than she usually allowed herself. They reached Ashgrave territory on the evening of the second day. The pack house rose up out of the tree line, bigger than anything Mira had ever seen in Thornwood, built from pale stone that caught the last of the sunset light and turned gold. Wolves moved through the courtyard, going about ordinary evening business, and when they noticed Ronan approaching, they straightened up with the kind of respect that wasn't forced, the kind that came from actually meaning it. Then they noticed Mira beside him, and the whispering started immediately. She braced herself for the same looks she'd gotten her whole life in Thornwood, the careful blankness, the quiet disgust, the mothers pulling children closer. Instead, what she got was curiosity, open and unguarded, nothing hidden behind it. Nobody here knew her yet. Nobody here had already decided what she was worth before she opened her mouth. It was strange, standing somewhere nobody had a reason to hate her yet. Ronan's second in command, a sharp-eyed woman named Talia who had clearly run the pack's daily business for years, met them at the door with a look that said she had 100 questions and the good sense not to ask most of them in front of the whole courtyard. "This is Mira," Ronan said simply. "She'll be staying." Talia studied Mira for a long moment, taking in the healing bruises, the careful, guarded posture, the way her eyes tracked every exit in the room without meaning to. Talia had seen that particular kind of watchfulness before, in wolves who had survived things they didn't talk about. "Welcome to Ashgrave," Talia said, and there was nothing sharp in it at all. The weeks that followed were unlike anything Mira had known. Nobody in Ashgrave treated her like a burden. Nobody made her earn her place through chores nobody else wanted, though she still found herself doing them anyway, because sitting idle felt wrong after a lifetime of being told her worth depended on how useful she made herself. Ronan noticed this too, the way he noticed most things about her that she thought she was hiding well. "You don't have to earn your place here," he told her one morning, finding her scrubbing pots in the kitchen before sunrise. "Nobody's going to send you back if you stop." "Old habits," she said, not stopping. "Old habits from people who never deserved you," he said. "You don't owe Thornwood's version of you to anyone here." She stopped scrubbing then, hands still in the cold water, and looked at him. Nobody had ever put it quite like that before, that the person she'd become in Thornwood, careful, small, always working to be worth the space she took up, wasn't something she owed anyone. It wasn't even really her, it was just what surviving had required. Slowly, over weeks that turned into months, Mira began to unlearn some of what Thornwood had taught her. She laughed more, though it startled her every time it happened, like she wasn't sure she still remembered how. She let Talia teach her things, how to read the pack's ledgers, how to settle small disputes between wolves before they turned into big ones, and found, to her own surprise, that she was good at it. Good at things that had nothing to do with fighting or surviving. Things that were just about being useful in a way that felt like contributing instead of scraping by. And Ronan was there through all of it, steady, patient, never pushing faster than she was ready to go. He didn't demand anything from her. He didn't claim her the way alphas sometimes claimed omegas in old stories, fast and certain and without asking. He waited. He let her come to him in her own time, in small steps, the same way she'd learned to trust the fire he built for her that first night on the road. It was nearly 6 months after the reckoning, when Mira found him standing on the same ridge where she'd first asked him what happens now. The valley below was turning gold with autumn again, the same season that had once meant fear and humiliation and a pit full of fighters sent to break her. This year, autumn just meant the trees were beautiful. "You've been quiet today," Ronan said, not turning around. "I've been thinking," Mira said, coming to stand beside him. "About?" About how a year ago, this season meant the worst day of my life, and now it just feels like a season. Ronan turned to look at her fully then, something careful and hopeful moving behind his eyes. Does that scare you? Mira thought about it honestly, the way she'd learned to think about things here, without the old instinct to armor every answer before she gave it. No, she said. It feels like something good happened by accident, and I'm still getting used to it. It wasn't an accident, Ronan said quietly. I chose to stand up that day. I've chosen to stay every day since. Why? She asked. The same question she'd asked him by the river, months ago, except this time she wasn't asking because she doubted the answer. She was asking because she wanted to hear it again. Because you didn't fall, he said. Not once. Not for any of them. And I decided a long time ago that I wanted to spend my life standing next to someone who doesn't fall. Mira didn't have a clever answer for that. She didn't need one. She simply reached over and took his hand, something small and ordinary that would have terrified her a year ago, and let it mean exactly what it meant, without questioning what it might cost her. Because in Ashgrave she was learning some things didn't cost anything at all. Some things were just given, freely, by people who had decided you were worth giving them to. And for a girl who had spent her whole life being told she was worth nothing, that was the biggest gift of all.